Okay, well, hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Dan Iglesias, the vice chair. I think we all know each other here in this room. I don't see anybody that we don't know. Um, so we'll just go right into the rules of engagement if we can. Um, so this workshop is I'm going to have to read it all, so bear with me. It's like last time. This workshop is being held virtually and is being recorded. If you experience technical difficulties, please contact Lisa Wan at the phone number and the email that's on the screen, so that a member of our technical support team may assist you. All attendees will remain muted throughout the duration of this workshop. If you wish to provide a comment, please use the raise your hand button. The chair, or vice chair in this case, will first acknowledge you and then the microphone will be unmuted. Please proceed by providing your full name, what agency you represent, and then your comment. Your microphone will remain unmuted until the comment has been fully addressed. In compliance with all applicable rules and regulations, no actions or motions shall be permitted in this workshop format. Discussions shall be limited to matters listed in the published workshop agenda. Permissible discussions include presentations, questions and answers, and comments related to the presentations. Any committee member deviating from these guidelines will be reminded as to the limitations of such discussions. And please hold all comments until the presentations are concluded. So we'll go right into the agenda. And the first one we have on is the Mobility Studies Project Update by Oscar Camejo with Miami-Dade TPO Project Manager. And I think, is Kevin Walford also here?
No, Vice Chair Kevin will be presenting the Aventura uh, mobility study at the next workshop.
Okay,
Next
so we'll turn
slide.
it over to Oscar Camejo. Thank you.
Mhm. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's good to see some faces I haven't seen in some time. As Paul stated, yes, there were three studies recommended or three locations that were recommended to be looked at along the busway, or two of which are in the south area, which is Southwest 244th Street in Florida City, and the one in the north, which is not on the busway, will be Aventura, and then Kevin will be doing that next week. So today we're going to talk about Florida City and Princeton. Next slide. So we're going to go over a simple, we're going to overview the project, talk about the surveying results and the summary of these studies, and then what to do beyond the study completion. Next slide. The picture on the left is the Florida City one. Florida City there are 14 BRT stations along the busway. These are two of them. These are two of the major ones. Florida City is the terminus one, which in the foreground at the very end of that is Palm Drive or Southwest 344th Street. So right now, this is a pretty simple bus-based stations where buses turn in and come back around. The picture on the right is the one that's considered, if you see the building in the background, the Redland Market Village. It's very active, especially during the weekends. It's a huge swap shop behind there, and there's feed stores and plenty of restaurants. It's actually, if you guys get a chance, you can go down there on the weekends and experiment with some of the food. It's a really fun place to be over the weekend for your family to visit. Next slide. The purpose of these studies is really to provide better connectivity and mobility and accessibility for the transit users to connect to these stations. We looked at these in depth. We did on-site visits. We had a stakeholder coordination for both of these efforts through study advisory group committee meetings. We had 3 for each one. We reviewed existing literature. There's been plenty of studies done along the bus rapid transit for several years now, since they're already broke ground, and hopefully construction will be completed by the end of 2023. We looked at multimodal accessibility. Conceptual renderings and drawings will be presented towards the end, and along with implementation and recommendations plan. Next slide, please. Public outreach. We had to get really creative this year, of course, because of the pandemic. Typically, when the scope was written, it was in January of last year, where we were going to go ahead and the way we're going to receive input from the community was typically you have a person standing at the stations with tablets, and they would answer questions that we inputted and directly be made part of the survey results. So this year we had to get real creative, and we had posters put in the bus shelters, which you can see there. The one that says out front is the vendor for transit. These posters are 4 feet wide by 5 feet tall. And we had quite a few of them. We had, see how many, we had 8, I believe, 10 of them in Florida City, and 8 of these in bus shelters at the Southwest 244th Street. We had fact sheets which were distributed to the Study Advisory Group Committee, which they in turn disseminated the information. The surveys were available online. If you see in the lower right of the bus shelter poster and on other documents, there was barcodes that one could scan. You don't have to touch any paper, and it would take you right to the online survey. We also had trifold brochures that were distributed at different locations in libraries and in Florida City, out the mall, electronically in that case over there, for persons to submit their comments. And we had all this documentation was available in 3 languages: English, Spanish, and Creole. Next slide. And here's just a map. It's kind of gerrymandered how Florida City is built. The white area is the city, the incorporated city itself. And of course, the shaded area is unincorporated Dade County. Next slide. What this map depicts is how long it takes to walk to the station itself. The little pink dot represents the BRT at Florida City. The lighter colors, for example, the light yellow is less than 5 minutes to walk there. The light green is less than 10 minutes, and so forth as you get outside. And it seems somewhat pixelated, mostly because there may be some barriers in place. Next slide. So here are some of the survey responses. The first one, your top concerns about transportation in Florida City. The number 1 concern was walking and biking access, followed by traffic congestion, transit service, and then commuting costs, the cost involved in commuting in that area. Another question was raised or offered to those who responded to the surveys how would you walk or bicycle more if, and as you can see on the bar size, proportionally, if they had more walking and bicycle infrastructure, it was by far the furthest response, the highest response. And if there are more destinations available to walk within a 15-minute, would be the second response. And if there was less or slower traffic, was the third highest response on that question. Next slide. They would ride more public transit if there are more options to get from their house destination to the transit stop, if the stations were safer and cleaner, or they felt safer, and the travel times were more reliable on the transit side. And what would make you consider using microtransit, for example, a scooter, to complete local trips or trips to transit stops? This is a little more balanced. However, availability was the top on the list. Having it more user-friendly was second, with the lower cost third, and dedicated e-scooter bike lanes and monthly subscriptions coming fourth and fifth, respectively. Next slide. This is the existing network in Florida City. As you can see by the legend, it's pretty complex. It has quite a different availabilities they're available. You can see on the far right, the Florida Keys Outlet Center, which has a long road leading into it. On where it says Route 3044, that is Southwest 344th Street or Palm Drive, and that is currently under construction, and they're hoping to get the bike lanes communicated across that. That's a huge employment center and a very high visited tourist center. There's a South Dade Trail that runs along this corridor, the Sun Trail and bus stops, and City Hall is just a few blocks west of this station. So for those who are employed there, they can easily take the bus here. Next slide. Here are some pictures of our on-site visit, our on-site survey. As you can see there, there's a little pooling and swirling, and the gentleman waiting for the bus, I believe there's a curb cut there. The raised curb ends at the corner. On the lower left, you see a gentleman riding a bike. And you see there's no markings there, or very faint markings. On the far right, the bigger picture, you could tell where people it's what's called, I guess, a beaten path, where the sidewalk ends. So there's definitely a need for connectivity for all these sidewalks and for pedestrians to make it easier to safely walk and bike. Next slide, please. On the upper left-hand corner, it was pretty interesting as we walked across. It's very hard to tell in this picture, but you see the grass is burnt a little bit right just to the left of the grate. There's actually the chain link fence is missing there. People have taken it down. And yeah, exactly. Thank you, Lisa. And that's where they've also created a pathway to get to the busway instead of walking all the way around. And that's one of our recommendations, is to make that a safe connection there, so they can access the trail, or the bike trail, and or the station itself. On the lower left, you see there's no sidewalks. On the right-hand side, the larger picture, that first driveway is where the buses exit the terminal. On the further driveway, that is where the buses enter the terminal. And you can see there's the bike lane, dedicated bike lane there. And this is pretty much towards the very end of the busway. And you can see a nice pothole there that's pooling water and some broken debris, and the striping is relatively poor. It's really fainted. So this is there's a lot of challenges, opportunities here to complement the existing network and to access the station. Next slide. These are what's recommended as a result of this study. The proposed bicycle route, which is the little green boxes, to make it easier to access the station and make it more accessible just to communicate within the area. We have the BRT station, which exists, but is of course the old style with the simple terminus. The yellow lines are recommended new sidewalks on one side. The orange lines are recommended sidewalks on both sides. So as you can see, there's a lot of gaps there that needs work in the Florida City to make it easier for people to connect to this station. Next slide. We divided it, all the recommendations by 2 terms, short term and midterm. Short term being 1 to 2 years. And these are the recommended, these are rough estimates of what it would cost to make these improvements. As you can see, there's quite a few, totaling roughly $1.5 million. The majority of them being sidewalk improvement projects. Some of them are bicycle and intersection enhancements and multimodal accessibilities, for a total of 28 projects for the short term, 1 to 2 years. Next slide. Now these are the midterm ones, 3 to 5 years. These are, as you can see, $2.5 million. There are 21 sidewalk improvement projects, 7 bikes, 7 intersections, and 2 multiple, for a total of 37 projects totaling $2.5 million rather. Next slide. This is a view looking southeast. If you're standing at the very end of the bus terminal on the outside by the sidewalk, as you can see, the asphalt is jagged and needs repair. It's not a smooth transition. The crosswalk is very faint. If you can go to the next slide, this is a superimposed rendering of what it would look like with all the improvements. And you can see the little squares indicating what exactly the improvements would be. Now, I know the FDOT has raised concerns. As you can see, the green striping that goes across Southwest 344th Street to Palm Drive, this would have to be specifically permitted by the state. Because in state roads, they have AASHTO certain standards that have to be met, and there could be exceptions made for this. Other than that, everything else is something that could be done, hopefully in the next near future. Next slide. And this is what it would look like, just removing those boxes to make it a little less busy. Of course, the Florida City Farmer Square does not exist. It's something that I think the residents and everyone would enjoy in that area. And there is not too far from there. There's actually a farmer's agricultural like depot, so to speak. Next slide. This is north of the study area. This is looking east on what's 4th Street. As you can see towards the background there already is a connection that is dedicated so people can cross there. If you can show the next slide. See, in the previous slide, there was no sidewalk at all on the north side of that 4th Avenue, or 4th Street rather. And this is a rendering of what you can add fitness equipment, like a cross-training trail, a fit trail. On the left, we could really highlight the South Dade Trail. People probably know that it's there, and you can connect to it. Adding green landscaping to the infrastructure there, to the swale area, to really make it a place where people want to go and walk around and access. And there you can see a microtransit, like a go-to, a little one of those ride-share vehicles, pedestrian amenities, some landscaping to make it shady area so people can walk without having to worry about too much sun. Next slide. This is what it would look like, of course, without all the improvements shown in little squares. Next slide. Now this is the second of the mobility hub studies. This is Southwest 24th Street, which is also called the Princeton area. This is unincorporated Dade County.
Oscar.
Yes.
Through the chair. Do you want to, since this is a separate project, do you want to see if there's any questions for the first?
Sure, whichever way you guys want to run the meeting.
For the first part?
That's probably a good idea, especially since I think Edward's going to have to go here soon. If anybody has questions at this point, if you want to raise your hand, I'd take the CTAC members first. If anybody has a question. Well, let's go with Edward. I know you're going to have to go soon, so let's go ahead and take your question.
No, thanks very much. I just had a question about the bicycle lanes. I guess there are two different things. This is all within budget. In one case, there were clearly physically separated lanes attaching to the bike trail. And then in the other picture, it looked like there were designated bike areas, bike lanes that were painted. Is that going to require road widening as well? Or
the way the renderings are shown, that's with existing.
Okay, but you showed that one, I think 4 slides back, not this one. This was very impressive. Go back one more, no, a couple, yeah. Yeah, this one, and then there was, I thought, one just before it or out. I guess that's right. So the bikes coming down both of these, it's just taking up additional space from existent roads, or is it widening the roads to have the bike lanes?
This is using the existing roadway. This is not widening neither the busway road terminus nor Palm Drive. That'll remain as many lanes as it is there.
So this won't affect traffic flow. It'll just create additional space, designated space for the bike, for the cycle.
If you go to the previous slide, Lisa, or I'm sorry, the one more before that. Oops. There you go.
Yeah.
You see the lanes, you still have, it's just a vaguely painted lane for the bicyclist there.
Right.
And then you have the striping.
Yep.
But the number of lanes remain the same. See, I think you have 2 lanes going west, and if you go to the next slide, or 2 slides over, you still have 2 lanes going west, and it's mostly more of a striping.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, it's an impressive difference. with this, and just looks like there's more space, but clearly it's just because of how it's painted and designated, right? Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Susan Shine, can you unmute?
At the beginning of your talk, you mentioned you were taking surveys at 8 bus stops, I guess, or 10 bus stops, and it was a total of 18 locations. Out of how many in total is that? Does that represent the entire public transportation area or just a portion of it?
That represented the whole area. As a matter of fact, I think we went outside of that area on a few of those bus shelters. So on the we just did Florida City. They were all either within or just outside of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see Alexander Adams. When I mute.
How did you raise your hand? I couldn't find it.
So raising your hand, if you look in the, I had to look it up, look in the reactions at the bottom. And if you hit reactions, then there's a thumbs up and stuff, but also raise your hand.
Oh, I see. Okay.
For all the board members. I had to figure it out again too.
Thank you.
It's been a while. Thank you. I think this looks great, especially the image that you're showing there. You know, at one point I even lived in the Keys, and you know, you forget how many people live in Miami-Dade and work in the Keys and use this station as well as the junction point to service even to the south. So it is a very big junction here. And then you've got the national parks in each direction and all of that. So I think it's much needed. I guess my question, and maybe you'll get to this as you go over the other stations, but the budget seems pretty reasonable. I mean, compared to other things that we look at in this board. I mean, 1.5 and 2.5 million for collectively over 40 projects. I mean, little pieces, but I mean, I think we should be looking holistically like you are within a radius of these things, because otherwise we give money to individual localities and they bit and piece, you know, a sidewalk here and a bike lane there and so forth. So I think it's great that you guys are looking at this. I guess my question would be, when it comes to financing it and all, when it comes to actually getting built, getting it in the program, the TIP and everything else, can we like prioritize certain stations, you know, rather than, let's say, doing the whole busway? For some reason, we have this tendency to want to do gigantic projects versus, you know, piecing them up and getting things actually done. So maybe you'll get into that in the others, but I think this looks great and is needed.
Yeah, but the costs are relatively low because I hate to use the word, but maybe they're more cosmetic in nature. There's no right-of-way acquisitions. There's no bridges. There's no major capital being purchased here. So that's why the costs are relatively low compared to other projects. And I'm glad you asked that, because as a matter of fact, Florida City, as a result of this study, applied for this year's Transportation Alternatives Program for funding. So they're going to put in about 700,000 themselves and about 1 million. And if they compete and if they do get awarded, they will get this. So this is one of those studies that I'm proud to say that doesn't just sit on the shelf. This is something that is Florida City is actively pursuing, as they were part of the study advisory group, and they have submitted this report to support their application to seek funding to program all these improvements.
Okay. I don't see any other hands right now. I'll ask my questions. Oscar, on the cross hatches, or however you want to call the green and white crosswalks that you just had on the screen, is that going to be a new norm? Is that going to be something that's been approved? I know you said that FDOT has to approve it because of the state road, but is that going to be a new norm to start seeing that type of crosswalks, so to speak?
It seems that it's like the bike standard that they know that green is like their right of way, so to speak. It really isn't when you're crossing the street. But if you've been to Miami Beach or anywhere in that area, if you go across the Venetian, you'll see a solid green painted 4 foot wide all the way until it gets to West Avenue. And many other areas. The beach is really the best indicator of this. You see a lot of green that are mostly for cyclists. Typically red is used for buses and the greens are for bikes. That's trying to be kept standard and uniform so they know, who's who in the zoo, so to speak.
Okay, good. My other question is just, I'm a little unclear on how this is going to dovetail into the SMART plan and the South Dade Busway. It seems like it's separate funding, separate projects. Can you just explain a little bit how it dovetails or doesn't dovetail into that program?
Yeah, it'll work in conjunction with it. I know the busway, of course, the busway is a lot. It's talking about hundreds of millions of dollars and the huge canopies that they're building at the station to replace it. This complements it in the periphery, if you may. So this is really trying to connect persons and bicyclists and transit users to the station, whereas the busway itself is really improving the busway and the stations themselves. So what this study does is try to connect people to these two stations that we're talking about today.
Okay, but in the SAC and all those other committees going into it, they talked a lot about the mobility, and there was parts of the mobility study of how to get people to the busway and obstacles.
Yes. As a matter of fact, the SAG, just for edification, consisted of course, the TPO, myself, and Lisa Colmenares. And for Florida City, we had Cindy Kyle, and we had Richard Stouts for the Florida City CRA. We had Kinley Horn, of course, was a consultant on this effort, did a great job. Stuart Robertson, John Lafferty, and Karen Gonzalez helped us with this. Miami-Dade Regulatory and Resources was also involved. Transportation Public Works had a transit representative and also a public works representative. Florida Department of Transportation was also involved. So we had a pretty robust study advisory group committee, and they had input all throughout the process. We met with them on three different occasions. We had this presentation, as a matter of fact, was made to them, and they had input on themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any other hands raised. The other thing you can do, I guess, is to participants and bring up your screen and raise your hand there. Paul, should we open up to the people on the phone? It seems like you have some people on the phone that may not be able to raise a hand, just to see if anybody has a question.
Lisa, do you have anybody that's on the phone?
Maybe Alan. Alan does have Alan iPhone.
Oh, Alan. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't think we have anybody else that wants to. Oh, wait, Norman Wortman has his hand raised.
Yep.
Okay, Norman.
Yeah, I mean, it looks to me like it's a real good idea for the last mile, first mile, which is always the big thing for all the big projects. And this one complements these quite a bit between the busway and stations and everything else. So I'd put this as a thumbs up for a great first mile, last mile project.
Okay, thank you, Norman. All right, not saying anything. Why don't we go ahead and go back, Oscar, to the second part?
And there is a chat. Alex mentioned the underline just added green bike lanes and across state roads just like this.
Okay, so now we can start off with the Princeton area of Southwest 244th Street, which mostly falls in unincorporated Dade County, or all of it falls within unincorporated Dade County. And this is a little simpler in the sense that it was a radius approach. You had the 1 mile and a 2 mile radius where we conducted this study. Next slide. Similar to the other map, this one indicates the walking time-wise that would take you to get to this Redland Market or Southwest 244th Street. Of course, as you go further out, the longer it takes you to walk. And there's a canal also there. It's a diagonal canal that intercepts this, and that's why you have a clear demarcation of colors exactly where the arrow is. Next slide. Now, we also had a As a matter of fact, we had a really good return on the responses for Southwest 244th Street. It was really a grassroots effort. We worked with the Red Lake Market Village, Mr. Jose Infante, who was an incredible help, and really thank him for being involved with this effort. And we had 201 results, survey results for the Southwest 244th Street. And these are the results of those efforts. As you can see, the top concern was people felt a little unsafe or uncomfortable walking and biking conditions, much more than half. The second to which the traffic congestion, and then inadequate public transit along with the high costs. People would ride and walk bike more if there were more walking and bicycle infrastructure. This is almost half of the population. That was their top concern. And there are also more destinations. If there are more destinations available, which is similar, both these surveys had the same options, just different areas. And that's why you're starting to see a similar pattern here. If there are more destinations to go to within a 15-mile walk radius, they would bike or walk more. And if it was safer. Next slide. They would ride transit more if the stations were, again, safer and cleaner. It took less time and they were closer to their home or work. And the microtransit, of course, the e-scooters and what have you, the go-to little buses. This is there's no slam dunk number one, but availability, lower cost, and more user-friendly were the top three, followed by the dedicated e-scooter and multi-subscriptions. Almost very similar to what was the Florida City results. Next slide. This is the existing network. As you can see in this case, it's just a straight diagonal line running right through it. That's where the busway goes. The main street there is the intersection of Southwest 248th Street, but the station is going to be at Southwest 244th Street. And you have buses that go along there. You have bus routes, sidewalks, and of course the South Day Trail is really long, goes along there on the busway. Next slide. And the same challenges, opportunities as there are in other places. Actually, I think when we did the walk with the consultant, 244 was actually worse. As you can see, if you the second picture on the lower center of the screen, you can see that's well, there's not much words for that. I guess a picture paints 1,000 words, right? On the left is Somerset Academy, which is a school. And on the right, you can see, and it hadn't really rained much, but you can see the pooling water and the traffic building up on those streets. Next slide. Here's a bike path, walk path that kind of parallels a canal. It's called the Princeton Trail. And you can see that's the relatively new landscaping and new buildings in the background. There aren't enough pedestrian amenities or industrial, agricultural, commercial uses adjacent to the station. There are few multifamily developments, and there are a large number of vacant parcels. And it seems like a hodgepodge of businesses that are there right now. Next slide. These are the recommended capital investment strategies. That blue line is a new multi-use path. There's no disconnect there, it's just because that already exists where it tries to cross from 244th Street. Improving access right on 244th Street. As you cross the street there really is not it's a dead end railing to a canal. And there's communities on the other side. And even comparing our site visit to Google Earth is huge how much building is going on, construction, and that's on the south side of US 1 for multifamily dwelling units. Next slide. And this is the study area where the recommended improvements that are to be made. You can see the little green squares are the new bicycle routes that go to connect from the Palm Drive south. Next slide. These are the 1 to 2 year short-term improvements. This is a little higher than the Florida City at $2.7 million. As you can see, there are many sidewalk gaps, which is most of it. Next slide. And these are 3 to 5 year improvements, which is $3.3 million roughly. Street day designs, large scale investments. Again, a lot of sidewalk gaps that are missing. Crossing treatments to make it safer for a person to go across the pedestrian island and so forth. Next slide. So here's what it looks like now. This is a recent picture that we took when we did the on-site visit. What's off the screen here to the far right is the Redland Market Village. And across the street is there's a canal just ahead of that pickup truck. And if you could show the next slide, this is what's being recommended. Again, we had the green paint across State Road US 1, which the gentleman did refer to that, yeah, on the underline does have green paint across State Road. So its precedence has been set. So it's something that can be done. And as you can see, there's a refuge island, which so persons can cross the street a little easier, have a pedestrian safety zone. And the markings, the crossings, and the textured paints. And as you can see, the future BRT station there, the canopy with the honeycomb structure. Next slide. And this is the same rendering without the itemized improvements and the landscaping shown. Next slide. This is pretty much the same intersection. You're looking from the intersection, you're looking northwest into that lot. I know the times I've actually gone to the Redland Marketplace, and it's been a while, pre-COVID. That lot gets full of vehicles, actually. Next slide. So here now we'll have a kiss and ride, a car sharing, a nice little urban plaza, the bike lane clearly delineated for those who want to use the bicycles. Next slide. So here it all is without the itemized captions. The landscaping makes a world of difference. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to TPC next Monday with the same exact presentation for these two mobility hubs. We are seeking funding opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the questions that are raised. Florida City is competing for TA funds for the full report recommendations. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a sponsor in time. Unincorporated Dade County, we're looking for a sponsor there, either Parks and Recreations or DTPW, to maybe see if we can get some funding from them. And we'll be working with the implementing agencies to hopefully get these recommendations initiated and implemented to make this a more user-friendly and accessible station for bicyclists and pedestrians. Next slide. That's it.
Okay, thank you. So same drill, if you have a question, you can raise your hand. We'll acknowledge the CTAC members first, and then we'll open it up. We have Susan Shine. You want to unmute and go ahead?
I just wanted to tell you, I wanted to reiterate what was said before. I think you did a beautiful job. That area is so barren and uninviting. I mean, I've taken the bus from there all the way up to, I don't remember wherever the last stop is. It takes a while. And, you know, and it was crowded. There were a lot of people there waiting. So it would be great to service that area in a nice fashion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Do we have anybody on the phones or public that wants to talk? Okay, I don't see anything. Oscar, I will ask a question, it's kind of a weird question, but just north of that intersection, there seems to be cement mixers that come out on the street and they dump a lot of cement, or there's been a lot of cement in that area. Would that damage what you're trying to do? Or is there any way of preventing that or working with them to try to prevent whatever destruction might happen?
Yeah, unfortunately, Hopefully they'll finish construction there by the time this gets built. It's something that's hard to control. I see that in paint sometimes too. But yeah, of course the cement that falls off those trucks, it does a lot more damage. Uh, like anything else, enforcement, have more police presence out there, because that's a major infraction when those things do happen, and it is a hazard.
Right. Okay.
Unfortunately, it comes with the territory. With growth and expansion, you have those type of incidences.
Okay. Well, thank you, Oscar. Great presentation. I agree that the plan looks great. And we appreciate the information. I don't see anybody else, so we'll go forward. Thank you, though, Oscar.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Chris Rosenberg is just tuning in, it looks like. So we'll go to item number 3, the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP. It's going to be a real workshop event. I think just more information, and then we'll let you present, and then we'll go to questions right afterwards, like we did just now. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Iglesias, and thank you, members of CTAC. This is just our introductory, communication on our TIP development cycle. We're continuing to meet with all of our partner transportation agencies to get all of the projects input into the new 2022 through 2026 TIP. We've had 10 virtual meetings. Obviously, all of our meetings have been virtual. So we are on meeting number 10. We kicked off the cycle in January, and I think everything's going smoothly given that we're doing everything in the COVID environment. We've had great participation from all of the partner agencies, and everything is on schedule. We are looking at a May adoption, so we will be coming through the CTAC with a preliminary draft in the month of April. And we will take any comments from CTAC at that point and bring back the final version at the May CTAC meeting. And then it'll go to the ultimate board at the May TPO governing board meeting for adoption. But where we're at this point is we're getting ready for our 45-day public review period, which is federally required. That date is going to be March 23rd this month. So at that point, we put the document out in its form for any public comments. So we're coming to the CTAC to let you know that that is coming up at the tail end of this month. You have the opportunity to provide comments through our website. We have a live link of the document, and we do work through Paul and Elizabeth and the PIO team to collect all public comments. All of those public comments are collected and reported to our TPO governing board, and we do respond to all the comments. So in addition to all of our formal communications through our committees, we also do work directly with the public to receive all comments. So that brings us through the month of March, and at the conclusion of the 45-day public review, we will be going to TPC on May 9th for their final review and comments. Anything that changes in the TIP during that public review comment has to get disclosed through the errata sheet process. So the public will also see if there's anything that was not there when they were reviewing the document. It does get disclosed through the errata sheets. So I just wanted to bring this item to the membership of CTAC so that you all are aware of the upcoming dates, and let you know that we'll be bringing this item to you twice before it does get formally adopted by the TPO governing board. And I welcome any questions that you may have. Thank you.
I'll just start out there, Chris. This is one of the primary things that we exist for too, to really give public comment on this as well. And for the newer members, I know we have several members who've been around for a long time to really understand the TIP. It's taken me personally a long time to really understand how the TIP comes together, and I still have some concerns and questions as we go, but it's an important thing. And I appreciate you coming in early. In the past, it would be at the last minute and questions would be asked and we couldn't get answered. I am concerned about that errata sheet, and in the past, it's been another issue that's come before this committee where we find out it's come to the committee even earlier, and now there's other issues that are being amended, and so we didn't get a chance to review those. So I'm glad to know we'll have that. Well, let me turn it over to anybody that has questions.
Just through the chair.
Yes.
I just through the vice chair, I just wanted to make a comment. This is an opportunity for us to introduction to the TIP. And I know Edward is not on here at this point in time, but maybe he might come back at the tail end. But some of our members, like you said, you've been on the board for a long time, and is TIP is an evolutional, is growing, and the understanding of it is huge. It's a lot to understand, you know, so it's hard to just go through it one time and have a complete understanding how it works. So we really want to invite Chris to come on and just, you know, have any, if anybody has any questions about TIP, so they can have a better understanding as they look through the documents, they can have a better input, because the more you understand, the better you can have a better input on it as well. And like Chris just said, he will be back again in April, and then we'll be looking for a resolution in May. So this is just an opportunity for any of the board members or any of the citizens listening right now to ask any questions to Chris at this point in time about the TIP, how it works, how can they, put their comments in, and just any questions you may have. We just wanted to make sure that Chris is available to answer those questions instead of answering those questions during the presentation. So you have an opportunity right now to ask any questions you may ask about the TIP, how long it is, how many items, you know, just anything you want to ask Chris right now, he's available for you.
I see Alexander Adams. You want to go ahead and ask your question? Unmute.
I guess my question is based on the previous item that we saw. How or what process to take a study like what we saw before, even though they're applying for, you know, some specific grants, but to get a study like that that seems to have quite a bit of impact, and if I can say bang for the buck, how would that get shaped into the TIP? Maybe,
Sure.
I don't know if I'm saying that right, but.
No,
you know
yeah.
what I'm
No,
saying.
I completely understand you. So the federal process dictates that project first has to reside in the long-range transportation plan in the cost feasible plan. So a lot of times projects are very conceptual when they come out of a study. They don't really have, you know, a concrete, please forgive the pun. They don't have a very detailed estimate. So sometimes there are concepts and they land in the unfunded section of the LRTP. That's okay. As long as something is in the LRTP, it's identified federally as something that our region is going to be looking at doing in the future. So a lot of the times, the first step after a project comes out of a study is it gets introduced into the LRTP in the unfunded section. It then moves its way forward into the more recent priorities. There's 4 priority sections. Priority 1, which is the TIP period. So once it gets into the first 5 years, it's already moved through future years. And that happens a few different ways, whether it's a local priority through the TPO governing board, whether it's a citizen request or something that is urgently needed that needs to be advanced. There's a lot of different ways that projects get advanced through the priorities in the LRTP. But ultimately, it needs to make its way to priority 1, whether that's just by years passing by or by it getting advanced through the technical committees and through our TPO governing board. So I hope that answers your question. It has to first start out in the LRTP, and then it actually, there's a mechanism that is in place to deliver projects from the LRTP into the TIP future years, which is our list of program priorities. And that is adopted also by our board every year. I do have a call out for projects for the LOPP, or the list of program priorities, that is underway right now. It's part of our TIP development process. It's sent out to all 34 municipalities and all representatives on the TIP development committee. I've asked for solicited projects back by the end of this month so that we can try to incorporate them into the TIP for next year. So that's kind of the bridge, if you will, to connect the LRTP to the TIP.
Okay. And what is that call out for projects called?
It's
Or
the
what
list
is-
of
where
program
is-
priorities. Yes.
Where is it?
It's been distributed to all 34 municipalities by our staff and also through our TIP development committee, which is a technical committee of the TPO, which has representation from all the large transportation agencies and municipalities.
Could that possibly be sent either through Paul or through somebody to the board members, just so we can get an idea and see that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I don't see any other hand raised. I will ask a question myself. Chris, the thing that I get that, it's on a long range transportation plan, and then it makes its way to the TIP, which is really like a 5-year work study, and it gets priority. And I've really, over all the years that I've been on this, I really start to understand why we have this, and it makes a lot of sense. It lets other municipalities, other agencies start to realize, in 3 years from now, we might be building this, or we might be doing that. And it makes a lot of sense. And a lot of things are based on that TIP, on future funding and future planning that all these municipalities are doing. Mm-hmm. Where I've disconnected, I think, is understanding when they come in with like the express lanes or the smart plan or something that's just off, came out of nowhere really quick, probably been thought about, but hasn't been in a long range transportation plan. Seems to make its way right to the TIP. And it starts funding right away. And I get that there's new priorities, like you were saying. My concern is the public involvement in all this. Right now, the big controversy south on the 87th Avenue Bridge. The concern that the public doesn't get an input on it. If it was in the TIP, there would have been public comment. There would have been the municipalities able to, I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the municipalities have a way of saying something along that TIP as well. But when projects are bypassed, how is it that the public comment or the public concern, because really our committee too is supposed to make sure that transportation plans are responsive to the perceived needs of the community, right? I mean, that's the basis of what we're doing even here. So how does something that comes out like an express lane that comes out quick, how does it get vetted still like any other project on the TIP so that we make sure that the public has a say in it and it doesn't just happen?
Sure. You brought up a great example. The 87th Avenue project is going to be coming up for consideration to be amended into the TIP as well as into the LRTP because it currently does not exist in either document. So there is a proposal by the requesting agency that is going to be considered by the Transportation Planning Council and also by the TPO Governing Board in the subsequent, I believe it's the meetings upcoming this month for consideration. Those are public hearing items. So if there's, any public comment, that's the opportunity to say, whether they're in favor or opposed to the request at hand. So, those kind of things do come up. The board has the discretion to, accept them or not. And, we then reflect it in the federally required documents. So at the point in which an amendment, which both of these documents can be amended at any time, they're living documents. At the point in which an amendment is introduced, it does have to go through a public comment period, and it has to go through the technical committees, and a public hearing does have to be heard. So these are advertised in the newspaper so that the public is informed that these are being considered.
And that public hearing will be at the TPO level then at that point?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions on the CTAC members? I don't see any raised hands. Anybody on the phone that has a question? Okay, I'll ask another one then. So on that 87th Avenue one, if it is approved the end of this month or not approved, well, if it's approved, it will make its way to the long range transportation plan and be put immediately on the TIP. Is that correct? The one that we'll be looking at in May?
Yes, the item that will be considered is to amend both the long-range transportation plan and the TIP simultaneously.
And that would be the 2022 to 26 TIP or?
The adopted 21 through 25 TIP.
So going back to 21.
Yeah, which is current year. So that's why it constitutes an amendment. Anything that changes an item in the current year for the TIP is an amendment. If it's not in the LRTP, here's another example. There's a project that's being considered, I think at the same meeting, that is not in the LRTP, but they're not planning to do it this year. So they're doing an LRTP amendment, and they're going to be including it in the TIP should that be accepted. So it's not required to be a TIP amendment because it'll be absorbed when we're doing our update to the document. But if it's in the current year, then the TIP needs to be amended formally.
Okay. All right. I see Norman Mortman. You have a question? You want to go ahead and unmute your mic?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, with the budget changes and revenue changes, the TIP, which is basically the 5-year component of the long-range plan, there's been a batch of state projects that have been moved back and stuff. The new TIP that's for this year, is there any special guide to a list of those in there that have been approved, worked their way through everything? They're almost ready to go, but because of funding constraints have been moved back. So how do we figure out which of those? I'm looking at a few that were supposed to be starting this coming fiscal year, and just want to make sure they're in there. And how do we look and do that?
So Norman, you asked a question that's near and dear to my heart, because I'm very interested in seeing the snapshot data of FDOT's work program. So we have data that is as of January 2020, with the caveat that they said things are still changing right now because of revenues. They're still assessing. They haven't collected the amount of gas tax that they thought they would, vehicle purchases, all the things that impact their revenues are kind of fluctuating right now. So they're doing a statewide revenue estimating conference within the next couple of weeks. And that will dictate the official data that's going to be going into the TIP. So they have promised me that they will be sending me a download of the snapshot that gets sent to the governor officially on March 17th. So as I mentioned at the beginning of my comments, our public review period is March 23rd. That's when it starts. So I will be able to capture the latest and greatest data reflective of all of the revenue adjustments. And the FDOT will have to come to our board in the fall this year to basically ask for approval of the tentative work program. They always do make mention of any variations from what the adopted to the tentative work program are. So they do a good job of disclosing to the public what those changes are and what the reasons are. And I have a very good feeling that a lot of those changes, are going to be impacting from the revenue adjustments that we've seen.
Okay, so but we'll be seeing that by the next meeting that you come to, correct? We'll have that information.
Yes, you will have a draft of the TIP. Obviously, it is not approved until the board approves it. You will have a draft TIP that includes all of the most recent changes to FDOT and all of the transportation partners projects. But FDOT is the largest portion of our TIP. So you'll see all of the data as of March 17th for that agency.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, I don't see any other hands. So I'll go back to asking another question. Chris, can you explain a little bit more on how municipalities get to say on this TIP? Because I understand and reading in the documents before that it does get sent out to the different agencies. I think you mentioned that you send it out to the different municipalities. I'm sorry, 34 municipalities. What is that process like? How do they get it? What kind of comments can they make back to the TPO or your agency, and how does that work?
Great. So the TIP includes all of the major transportation surface improvements on, the state, federal, and county arterial roads, and all transit, operating agencies, port, aviation. So all the big, agencies are represented. That's what the federal requirements dictate. We always open the door to the municipalities, and we're inclusive to make sure that they're represented in the TIP process. So what I do when I send out the list of program priorities request is I send it to all the municipalities, and I allow them to identify needs that they may have that we can assist them in identifying grants for, if they qualify for something that can be, taken over by one of the larger agencies, that we can find some funding for them. That's really the main reason why we send it to the municipalities, because our staff has a really good ability to work with the different agencies to find the best fit, and get some grant funding over to the municipalities directly. So, we always try to maximize the revenues that are available through that process.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'm out of questions, so thank you. Anybody else? If not, we'll stop on this item. Okay, I don't see anything else. So thank you, Chris. I understand you'll be back next month to answer any more questions we may have. We may very well be still in a workshop format next month when it hasn't been determined yet. And then May, it sounds like we'll be voting on the TIP.
Yes, I will have a draft ready for you, and by next month, we will be in the 45-day public review period. So even before next meeting, if you all have any questions or comments, please send them directly to me or through Paul. I'd be happy to assist.
Great. Thank you again.
Yeah,
For your,
you can send it directly to me. Thank you.
thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too. Thank you. Okay, I think that concludes our agenda. I will open it one more time to the CTAC
Sure.
members. I'm sorry.
Through the chair, just a shameless plug here that we do have a taste of transportation that will be it'll be featuring the TIP.
Okay.
So look out for that. It will be next month. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I will open up the floor to any CTAC members. If you have anything you'd like to discuss, again, it can't be any motions or anything that we need to do in a regular meeting format. But if you have any questions or even something you need to be put on to future workshops, we'll open to the CTAC members. I don't see anybody with their hand raised. And then the public, anybody has any other comment from the public? I do see Victoria Williams from Fdot. Did you need to say anything today to the committee or did you want to?
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. I represent Turnpike. No updates at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, and so we do not have our next CTAC meeting scheduled. Right now, it does appear it will be a workshop. We definitely will be having a official meeting, it appears in May, so we can vote on the TIP. And at that time, we'll be voting on the filling the chairperson position until the end of that term. But we may very well be meeting April if things change, and we'll just have to stay tuned to Paul's emails and see if that does change. But right now it's a workshop. Anything else, Paul, that we need to mention?
No, nothing. That's it, Chair. I think you covered everything.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for tonight and your time, and we'll see you next time. We'll end the meeting.
Thank you.